أجمد حالة السلام السائد حالة السلام السابع السلام الوطني حالة السلام سلام
شكرا.
هيثم بس افتح تليفونك يا سامي.
place. Col nome di Dio, misericordioso, misericordia, a nome mio e delle signore e signori presenti e degli iracheni nella loro diversità e antiche appartenenze, Sua Santità il Papa. 1, 2, 3, chiaro la voce.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. And I would love to welcome all of you to this live broadcast. We're coming to you, as I said, live from Baghdad in Iraq. We're following Pope Francis on the first ever trip of a pope into the land of Abraham. Right now, we're seeing him with the president of Iraq. The official welcome ceremony in the presidential palace is about to begin. And our Holy Father will shortly be meeting with authorities, civil society, members of the diplomatic corps here in the presidential palace in Baghdad. Before going on, I would love to welcome all of you who are joining us for this broadcast, many of you connecting to us through the various Vatican Media, Vatican Radio channels. From wherever you're joining us, whatever time of the day, a warm welcome to all of you. Some of you joining through the Vatican Audio Live Events app, the Radio Vaticana Vatican Radio app, the Vatican News web portal, or the Vatican News English YouTube channel, or our Facebook Live feed. Many of you joining us through television, welcome to all of you, whether you're joining us through Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World TV, EWTN, Salt and Light TV, at Madarshan TV, and all of you joining through radio. A warm welcome to all of you as well. We have some tuning in through Radio Maria in Latvia, and then also Radio Maria in Papua New Guinea, and Luminous Radio, and as we know, other internet sites throughout the world. Here we're seeing images from the presidential palace, and of course, the flags of the Holy See and Iraq. My name is Sister Bernadette Reese, and it's my pleasure to be able to provide you with the English language texts for today. As I said, this is the first ever apostolic journey of any pope here in Iraq, the land of Abraham, the father of the three monotheistic religions. We're seeing some gifts here. It is Pope Francis's 33rd apostolic journey since becoming pope in 2013. As we recall, his first apostolic journey was to Brazil. That was in 2013, shortly after he became pope for World Youth Day. His last was 15 months ago when he visited Thailand and Japan. As Pope Francis mentioned in his general audience on Wednesday, John Paul II wanted to visit Iraq in the Jubilee year 2000, but was not able to do so because the president at that time did not give the Lord to get up and go forth from Ur. It also shows a palm with dates, a symbol of prosperity and material and spiritual wealth. As I said, our Holy Father left Rome this morning just before 7:30. He flew over Italy, Greece, Chypre, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan before touching down at Baghdad International Airport at around 2 p.m. local time, and right now it's about 10 minutes to 4 in the afternoon local time. And on board, he brought an icon of Our Lady of Loreto with him. He usually travels with an icon of Our Lady of Good Air or Buenos Aires. But since we're in the Jubilee year of Loreto, he brought an icon of Our Lady of Loreto. Here we find ourselves in a hall of the presidential palace, initially built as a royal palace by King Faisal II, who reigned in Iraq from 1953 to 58. And this was a favorite place where Saddam Hussein would welcome heads of state. The United States spared the palace during its shock and awe raid during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, believing that it might hold valuable documents, and it later became the headquarters of the coalition troops during the occupation of Iraq, as well as the primary base of operations for the American diplomatic mission in Iraq until the opening of the U.S. Embassy there in 2009. Our Holy Father, after being greeted at the airport to take his seat by the Prime Minister, we should be hearing now from the welcome delegation meeting him there, of course always with children of Iraq who will be greeting bearing flowers. Our Holy Father this is the first was brought here to the presidential palace where he was greeted 3-day by the President of the Republic of Iraq, Mr. Barem Ahmed Salih Qassim, a journey he first whom we will be announced he wanted shortly to take in June of 2019. Of course, the playing of the two national anthems and the presentation at that time he said that of the delegation wanted to make the trip in 2020. Of course, taking of the official study materialized due to the COVID-19 between the two pandemics. So as soon as he was able to, and we just saw he planned the trip, the first apostolic visit in 15 months. A few other dignitaries here have just taken their seats. Our Holy Father, as is his custom, greeted all of the citizens of Iraq in a video message.
باسمي ونيابة عن السادة والسيدات
In the name of God the Merciful,
العراقيين
in the name of all those present,
بمختلف تنوعهم
ladies and gentlemen,
وانتماءاتهم العريقة.
in my name
نرحب بكم يا قداسة
and of all those present,
من عظيم سعادتنا أن تكون
in the
بيننا
name of all Iraqis,
في بلاد
in their
وادي
diversity
في بلاد
and in their ancient affiliations.
ديان السماء.
We welcome you, Holy Father,
بغداد دار السلام.
and we are truly happy for your presence here with us in Iraq, in Mesopotamia, in the lands of the prophets and the heavenly religions. Welcome to Baghdad, the house of peace.
مرحبا بكم في أور.
The other Iraqi cities also welcome you, Najaf, Mosul, Erbil,
ولادة النبي إبراهيم عليه السلام
and Karakosh.
أبي الأنبياء. فكانت
Welcome
المدينة التي
to
تهمل
Ur,
قلوب البشر من جميع الديانات السماوية.
our most ancient city that invented writing and which had the honor of having seen the birth of the prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, the father of the prophets, the city for which the hearts of people of all heavenly religions yearn. Your important role in encouraging peace, social justice, and confronting poverty, and your generous effort to affirm dialogue, living together, and human fraternity are a source of pride and appreciation for everyone, and are an inspiring message for everyone for the elevated responsibility it entails with regard to life and humanity. Thank you, Holy Father, for accepting our invitation and for your desire to make this visit. We appreciate its historic, religious, and human dimension, which is an additional proof of your concern for Iraq. During our previous meetings in the Vatican, I was able to feel the breadth of your concern for this country, and I noticed how you follow the news and suffer from the tragedy that Iraqis have experienced and the affliction they have endured because of the wars, violence, and external interference. Iraqis express their pride in your presence, Your Holiness, as their important and dear guests, despite the recommendations that you postpone the visit due to the exceptional circumstances the world is going through as a result of the pandemic, and despite the difficult conditions that our wounded country is going through. Overcoming all these circumstances actually doubles the value of your visit in the eyes of Iraqis. Despite the storms of violence, tyranny, and totalitarianism that have engulfed our country in the various phases of our history, Iraqis are proud to have lived for many centuries in cities rich in a great variety of affiliations where they live closely with each other in cities or neighborhoods, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Sabaeans, Yazidis, brothers and sisters to each other. The churches are nearby the mosques and places of prayer, and the sound of the church bell mixes with the call to prayer in Iraq's skies. Iraqis are equally proud to be protectors of churches. After the terrorist attack on the Church of Our Lady of Salvation, young Muslims stood side by side with their young Christian brothers. It was as if, with this gesture, Iraqi Muslims were aware that their patriotic and humanitarian responsibility required them to defend the church in the same way that they would have defended their home and their own sacred places. Similarly, among the memorable scenes of the liberation of Mosul, that of a church ruined by ISIS terrorists, this scene comes to mind. In that scene, the world witnessed Muslim soldiers appear, faces and clothing completely covered in the dust of battle, carrying the cross on their shoulders to bring it back to its holy place in the church after they liberated it, while their officer stood respectfully and reverently giving a military salute to the statue of the Virgin Mary and Christ. This is a human value with deep meaning, deeply rooted. It is an educational value that arises from the conviction of all Iraqis that the bond of diversity and peaceful coexistence is a supreme value firmly rooted in their country, just as the palm tree has been rooted for thousands of years in the roots of their homeland. When the Islamic message began to arrive, Christianity welcomed Islam and protected Muslim immigrants in Abyssinia. And Nejus, a Christian, said to Jafar, a Muslim who was despised, he said, "There's no difference between us. There's only a line between us." And from the early days of the Islamic state, when Imam Ali, peace be upon him, ruled from Iraq, we recall his eloquent saying, filled with humanity. And I quote, "There are two types of people, either a brother or sister in religion or an equal in creation," unquote. This is our inspiring story of peaceful living together, love, and human fraternity. This is our present that generates those supreme and noble values. Our world today lives, unfortunately, in a time of opposition and polarization where a large part of it, especially in the East, is losing its appreciation for pluralism, diversity, and acceptance of the opinion of the other. And this path feeds terrorism and foments violence, hatred, and the commission of atrocities, with pretexts that have nothing to do with the tolerant spirit of the divine message. And this is what threatens our whole future. Therefore, it is essential to continue to fight extremist ideologies, to eradicate the roots of terrorism, and to make the values of coexistence and diversity prevail, of which our nations are rich, and to transform them into elements of strength and cohesion. The consolidation of these values has become an urgent need in our world today, and it is the best gift we can make to the future of our new generations. For more than 2 decades, our people have been the victims of useless wars and oppressive policies never before seen in history. We've seen hundreds of thousands of Iraqis killed, of all backgrounds. They've been murdered, they have disappeared, and the dictatorship used chemical weapons with the consequent extermination campaigns in Anfal, with mass graves in the southern and central cities, and the drying up of the marshes, and the terrible destruction of the environment. In the last 2 decades, we have experienced the largest war on terrorism, in which entire cities have been destroyed, their economies destroyed, their families displaced, women enslaved, churches ruined, fields burned and plundered. Precious monuments have been plundered, and the worst violations committed against the Yazidi and Turkmen women, and the bloodiest of massacres in Sinjar and Sapikar, and Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, members of every type of society were equally targeted. We remember our own martyrs of our armed forces, victims among the police, and civilians who sacrificed their lives in order to confront these atrocities. These are tragedies to which all Iraqi people have been victims, but We refer in particular to the great suffering of our brothers and sisters who are Christian, who were forced to leave their homes, their fatherland, homeland. And this suffering has been experienced by Christians in various countries of the Middle East. These have been difficult years for Iraq, and still we have numerous challenges, enormous challenges ahead of us to meet the demand of our citizens, a structural reform of the system of government in our country, the progress of the construction and consolidation of social justice, the challenge to offer jobs to our young people, to create security and freedom, and to strengthen our country's sovereignty. Various countries have lost blood. We've all been losers in this black chaos.
وجسرا للتواصل والتعاون بين دول المنطقة لا ساحة للصراع
To heal the deep wounds afflicted by Iraq requires our care and commitment to ensure that Iraq becomes once again a place of harmony, a bridge for communication and cooperation, not a place of conflict and rivalry. This land needs to be independent with full, not partial sovereignty. Iraq needs to be a part of the local reconstruction, respecting human rights and law. The Christians of Iraq, the Christians of the East, have given a lot to this land. They have faced the various challenges with their brothers of all confessions and have given an historic contribution of civilization in their own struggle. They've been very influential and rooted, and they have involved themselves in the construction of our societies and in giving life to authentic Eastern customs, traditions, and values. In recent times, Christians in the East have suffered various crises which have reduced their presence and pushed them to emigrate. Undoubtedly, the hemorrhage of Christians, along with other religious, ethnic, and national components, will have disastrous consequences for the values of pluralism and tolerance, but also for the capacity of coexistence or living together of the peoples of the same region. An East without Christians is unimaginable. There will be no success in the East unless the displaced persons and expatriates return from the countries in which they have found asylum without coercion. And so I ask, this requires vigorous work for economic development and security and stability throughout the region so as to achieve a national atmosphere that attracts these immigrants and expatriates back, primarily Christians and Yazidis, etc. We need to emphasize that the living conditions under the threat of COVID-19 have once again confirmed that the world altogether needs to develop peace and solidarity, to overcome various polarizations and conflicts, to unite collective potential in the interest of progress at the service of life and humanity. Today, as you, Your Holiness, our dear and kind guest, come among us in Iraq, we believe this is a historic opportunity, an opportunity to reaffirm the values of love, peace, coexistence, that of welcoming others and supporting diversity, or sustaining diversity enjoyed by our countries through humanitarian initiatives resounding all over the world so that cooperation and common work might achieve them. We, the descendants of the prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, followers of the Abrahamic religions, Iraqis and others, we cannot accept that terrorism and extremism are practiced in the name of religion, and we cannot accept injustice either, because Iraq deserves the best. Iraq deserves a promising future for all its children. It is a country that is rich in resources, that deserves to be in a situation of peace. It deserves better. It deserves a future of collaboration. And this can be done on the occasion of this visit. I express my hope that the initiative to establish the House of Abraham for religious dialogue will be carried out, and that the permanent conference or symposium for dialogue will be established under the supervision of the Vatican delegates of Najaf, of Al-Azhar, of Zaytuna, and of the main religious centers that are researching the common and pluralistic history in the light of sacred objects or archaeology. Holy Father, we are healing our wounds, and here you, Holy Father, you have come to heal them with us. Thank you for the generosity of this historic visit and for what you are doing for the good of humanity in Iraq and on earth. I have the honor to invite you to speak at this honorable meeting, and from here to greet all Iraqis. Thank you, Holy Father. We've just heard the President of Iraq officially welcoming Pope Francis here in Iraq. President Bahram Ahmed Salih Kazim, elected President of Iraq in 2018. Again, as I said, being the first ever Iraqi leader to welcome any pope to the land of Iraq, the land in which Abraham was born. Mr. President, members of government and the diplomatic corps, distinguished authorities, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen.
Sono grato dell'opportunità di compiere questa visita. I
am grateful for the opportunity to make this long-awaited and desired visit to the Republic of Iraq and to come to this land, a cradle of civilization, closely linked through the patriarch Abraham and a number of the prophets to the history of salvation and to the great religious traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Esprimo la mia gratitudine al signor Presidente Salih per l'invito.
I express my gratitude to His Excellency President Salih for his invitation and for his gracious words of welcome, offered also in the name of the other authorities of the nation and its beloved people. I likewise greet the members of the diplomatic corps and the representatives of civil society. I greet with affection the bishops and priests, men and women religious, and all the faithful of the Catholic Church. I have come as a pilgrim to encourage them in their witness of faith, hope, and love in the midst of Iraqi society.
Saluto anche I membri di altre chiese e comunità ecclesiali cristiane, gli aderenti all'Islam.
I also greet the members of other Christian churches and ecclesial communities, the followers of Islam, and the representatives of other religious traditions. May God grant that we journey together as brothers and sisters in the firm conviction that authentic teachings of religions invite us to remain rooted in the values of peace, mutual understanding, human fraternity, and harmonious coexistence. That last phrase coming from the document on human fraternity. My visit is taking place at a time when the world as a whole is trying to emerge from the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected not only the health of countless individuals, but has also contributed to a worsening of social and economic conditions already marked by fragility and instability. This crisis calls for concerned efforts by all to make necessary steps, including an equitable distribution of vaccines for everyone. But this is not enough. This crisis is above all a summons to rethink our styles of life and the meaning of our existence, a quotation from Fratelli Tutti. It has to do with coming out of this time of trial better than we were before, and with shaping a future based more on what unites us than on what divides us. Over the past several decades, Iraq has suffered the disastrous effects of wars, the scourge of terrorism, and sectarian conflicts, often grounded in a fundamentalism incapable of accepting the peaceful coexistence of different ethnic and religious groups, different ideas and cultures. All this has brought in its wake death, destruction, and ruin, not only materially. The damage is so much deeper if we think of the heartbreak endured by so many individuals and communities, wounds that will take years to heal. Here, among so many who have suffered, my thoughts turn to the Yazidis, innocent victims of senseless and brutal atrocities, persecuted and killed for their religious beliefs, and whose very identity and survival was put at risk. Only if we learn to look beyond our differences and see each other as members of the same human family will we be able to begin an effective process of rebuilding and leave to future generations a better, more just, and more humane world. In this regard, the religious, cultural, and ethnic diversity that has been a hallmark of Iraqi society for millennia is a precious resource on which to draw, not an obstacle to be eliminated. Iraq today is called to show everyone, especially in the Middle East, that diversity, instead of giving rise to conflict, should lead to harmonious cooperation in civil life. Fraternal coexistence calls for patient and honest dialogue, protected by justice and by respect for law. This task is not easy. It demands hard work and a commitment on the part of all to set aside rivalries and contrapositions, and instead to speak with one another from our deepest identity as fellow children of the one God and Creator. On the basis of this principle, the Holy See, in Iraq as elsewhere, tirelessly appeals to the competent authorities to grant all religious communities recognition, respect, rights, and protection. I appreciate the efforts already being made in this regard, and I join my voice to the men and women of goodwill in calling for these efforts to continue for the benefit of the nation.
Una società che porta l'impronta dell'unità fraterna è una società in cui i membri vivono tra loro in solidarietà.
A society that bears the imprint of fraternal unity is one whose members live in solidarity with one another. Solidarity helps us to regard others as our brothers, companions on our journey. It is a virtue that leads us to carry out concrete acts of care and service with particular concern for the vulnerable and those most in need. Here I think of all those who have lost family members and loved ones, home and livelihood due to violence, persecution, or terrorism. I think, too, of those who continue to struggle for security and the means of personal and economic survival at a time of growing unemployment and poverty. The consciousness that we are responsible for the fragility of others ought to inspire every effort to create concrete opportunities for progress, not only economically, but also in terms of education and care for our common home. Following a crisis, it is not enough simply to rebuild. We need to rebuild well, so that all can enjoy a dignified life. We never emerge from a crisis the same way we were. We emerge from it either better or worse. In your positions as governmental leaders and diplomats, you are called to foster this spirit of fraternal solidarity. It is necessary but not sufficient to combat the scourge of corruption, misuse of power, and disregard for law. It is also necessary to promote justice, to foster honesty, transparency, and to strengthen the institutions responsible in this regard. In this way, stability within society grows and a healthy politics arises, able to offer everyone, especially to the young, of whom there are so many in this country, sure hope for a better future. Dear Mr. President, distinguished authorities, dear friends, I come as a penitent, asking forgiveness of heaven and my brothers and sisters for so much destruction and cruelty. I come as a pilgrim of peace in the name of Christ, the Prince of Peace. How often we've prayed in these years for peace in Iraq. St. John Paul II spared no initiative, and above all offered his prayers and sufferings for this intention. And God listens. God always listens. It's up to us to listen to Him and to walk in His ways. May the clash of arms be silenced. May their spread be curbed here and everywhere. May partisan interests cease, as well as those outside interests uninterested in the local population. May the voice of builders and peacemakers find a hearing, the voice of the humble, the poor, the ordinary men and women who want to live, work, and pray in peace. May there be an end to acts of violence and extremism, factions and intolerance. May room be made for all those citizens who seek to cooperate in building up this country through dialogue and through frank, sincere, and constructive dialogue. Citizens committed to reconciliation and prepared for the common good to set aside their own interests. Iraq has sought in these years to lay the foundations for a democratic society. For this, it is essential to ensure the participation of all political, social, and religious groups, and to guarantee the fundamental rights of all citizens. Let no citizen be regarded as second class. I encourage the strides made so far on this journey, and I hope that they will strengthen tranquility and harmony. The international community also has a role to play in the promotion of peace in this land and in the Middle East as a whole. As we have seen during the lengthy conflict in neighboring Syria, which began 10 years ago in these very days. The challenges facing our world today engage the entire human family. They call for cooperation on a global scale in order to address, among other things, the economic inequalities and regional tensions that threaten the stability of these lands. I thank the countries and international organizations working in Iraq for its reconstruction and to provide humanitarian assistance to refugees, the internally displaced, and those attempting to return home by making food, shelter, healthcare, and hygiene services available throughout the country, together with programs of reconciliation and peace building. Here, I cannot fail to mention the many agencies, including a number of Catholic agencies that for many years have been committed to helping the people of this country, meeting the basic needs of so many of our brothers and sisters. Meeting the basic needs of so many of our brothers and sisters is an act of charity and justice and contributes to a lasting peace. It is my prayerful hope that the international community will not withdraw from the Iraqi people, will not withdraw their outstretched hand of friendship from the Iraqi people, that they will help in constructive engagement and will continue to act in a spirit of shared responsibility with the local authorities without imposing political or ideological interests. Religion, by its very nature, must be at the service of peace and fraternity. The name of God cannot be used to justify acts of murder, exile, terrorism, or oppression. On the contrary, God, who created human beings equal in dignity and rights, calls us to spread the values of love, goodwill, and harmony. In Iraq, too, the Catholic Church wants to be a friend to everyone and, through interreligious dialogue, to cooperate constructively with other religions in serving the cause of peace. The ancient presence of Christians in this land and their contributions to the life of the nation constitute a rich heritage that they wish to continue to place at the service of everyone. Their participation in public life as citizens with full rights, freedom, and responsibility will testify that a healthy pluralism of religious beliefs, ethnicities, and cultures can contribute to the nation's prosperity and harmony. Dear friends, I would like to express once again my heartfelt gratitude for all you have done and continue to do in building a society of fraternal union, solidarity, and harmony. Your service to the common good is a noble one. I ask the Almighty to sustain you in your responsibilities and to guide you in the ways of wisdom, justice, and truth. Upon each of you, your families and loved ones, and upon the entire Iraqi people, I invoke an abundance of divine blessings. Thank you. Our Holy Father just finished his discourse here to the 150 people present in the hall of the presidential palace in Baghdad in this first public event of Pope Francis's apostolic visit to Iraq. The President now will accompany the Holy Father to the entrance of the palace, and our Holy Father will then take his leave. His next scheduled stop is the Syriac Catholic Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation. We heard this church mentioned in the President's address, where he said that both Muslim and Christian young people stood side by side after the destruction of that beloved place of worship for Catholic Christians here in Baghdad. Our Holy Father here surrounded, as we see, by members of the diplomatic corps and government and religious leaders present here. It's been a long Salvation, where the Holy Father will be meeting with bishops, priests, religious seminarians, and catechists. I invite you to visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube accounts. You'll find complete coverage of our Holy Father's 33rd Apostolic visit here in Iraq, as well as other Vatican and world news. We thank all of the technicians who've made this broadcast possible and all of you for joining us. We'll be back soon. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.
يلا again. حبك يا بابا. سينا والشامة. We love you, Papa. Je t'aime, Papa. Benvenuto, Papa. Viva la Papa. حبك يا بابا. سينا والشامة. We love you, Papa. Je t'aime, Papa. Viva la Papa. حبك يا بابا. سينا والسلامة. We love you, Papa. Je t'aime, Papa. Benvenuto, Papa. Viva la Papa.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. And a warm welcome to all of you joining us. We're coming to you live from Baghdad in Iraq. Our Holy Father is just outside the Syriac Cathedral, Catholic Cathedral, of Our Lady of Salvation here in Baghdad. He'll be meeting shortly with priests, bishops, religious seminarians, and catechists. We now see the interior of this cathedral. On behalf of Vatican Media, Vatican Radio, I'd like to welcome you all from wherever you're joining us today. Some joining through the various Vatican Media channels, our Vatican Audio Live Events app, or the Vatican Radio app, the Vatican News web portal, Vatican News English YouTube channel, or our Facebook Live feed. To all of you joining us through television, we have some of you tuning in through Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World TV, EWTN, Salt and Light TV, at Madarshan TV. And to our radio listeners out there, some of you tuning in through Radio Maria in Latvia, others through Radio Maria in Papua New Guinea, and Luminous Radio, and to all the other local radio stations picking up the broadcast and other internet sites. My name is Sister Bernadette, and it is a privilege for me to be able to provide the English language texts and translations for you on this 33rd Apostolic Journey of Pope Francis, who finds himself in Iraq. He's been wanting to come here a long time. He's taking a look at something up there. He's now entering the cathedral, flanked by the local ordinaries. We have His Beatitude Ignatius Yusuf III Yunan, the Patriarch of Antioch and of the Syrians. It looks like also joining him is Archeparky Ephraim Yusuf Abba Mansur, the Archpatriarch of Baghdad for the Syriac Catholic Eparchy. It is difficult to identify people with certainty since they are wearing face masks to protect themselves from the current COVID-19 pandemic. We also remember John Paul II wanted to visit this land, but was never able to in the Jubilee year 2000 due to the political condition of Iraq at that time. A little bit about the cathedral our Holy Father is about to enter. He first is greeting the sick here. It looks like there's a Lourdes grotto behind. A moment our Holy Father generally finds wherever he goes to be able to meet with the sick. The cathedral our Holy Father is about to enter is the Cathedral of the Syrian Catholic Archeparchy of Baghdad, one of the largest churches in the city. It was the target of two terrorist attacks. One took place on October 31st in 2010. We heard the president of Iraq recall that attack. The so-called Islamic State took responsibility for that attack. It was extremely bloody. There were 48 Catholics killed. Another 10 were killed as well, including 2 priests. About 70 others were injured. The cathedral itself is located in the central district of Karada. The current structure was inaugurated in March of 1968, and it was built on the site of a small church that had been built there in 1952, and of course it was enlarged in order to accommodate the then increasingly numerous and expanding Syriac Catholic community. As we enter the cathedral, you'll be able to see that the structure represents a boat. It was designed that way to provide the image of the bark of Peter, or another symbol of the church that carried Jesus and his disciples in the storm. An apt symbol that our Holy Father recalled during the extraordinary moment of prayer last March. Attached to the cathedral is St. Ephraim's Elementary School. After the attack in 2010, the church was renovated and a memorial was set up here, remembering the victims. The 2 priests who were slain are buried in the crypt of this church. So we're entering a very sacred place right now, and here we see our Holy Father was given the cross to bless the church, a custom observed in several Oriental rites. Before the Iraqi war, there were about 5,000 families who regularly came here into this cathedral to worship, and since 2018, all 3 of Baghdad's Syriac Catholic churches regularly welcome only about 1,000 families. Holy Father has entered the church now. He is standing just before the altar. A child here bringing him flowers, which he will now take. This is customary when our Holy Father enters a Catholic place of worship. Our Holy Father has now taken his seat, and now I can confirm that the person who has accompanied our Holy Father to the altar is His Beatitude Ignatius Yusuf III, Yunnan Patriarch of Antioch and of Syrian Catholics. Christians here in Iraq have long been awaiting our Holy Father's journey, and he sent them a video message prior to coming to their land saying, "I have greatly desired to meet you, to see your faces, to visit your country, an ancient and outstanding cradle of civilization." And coming as a pilgrim, he said, a penitent pilgrim, to implore from the Lord forgiveness and reconciliation after years of war and terrorism, to beg from God the consolation of hearts and the healing of wounds. As we see our Holy Father here, these are the sentiments he has brought with him. Sitting on the other side of our Holy Father is His Eminence, Cardinal Louis Raphael Sacco. He's the Metropolitan Archeparky of Baghdad of the Chaldeans. The motto of the Pope's trip to Iraq, "You are all brothers and sisters," taken from Matthew chapter 23, verse 8. Our Holy Father continued in his video message, "I am coming as a pilgrim of peace, seeking fraternity and prompted by the desire to pray together and to walk together, also with our brothers and sisters of other religious traditions, in the steps of Father Abraham, who joins in one family Muslims, Jews, and Christians."
Santo Padre, to bachlom ro'yo shariro wamdabrono hakimo, benvenuto nella pace, pastore vero. Welcome in peace, Holy Father and wise leader. Iraq, its people and government leaders today welcomes you with great hope, Your Holiness, messenger of peace and fraternity. With filial affection and deep gratitude, your sons and your daughters in the Lord have the privilege of meeting their father, the Bishop of Rome, as their father on the first day of your long-awaited visit in this cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation, which is so dear to us. Saint Ignatius of Antioch the Theophorus, patron of our patriarchal see, affirmed that the Church of Rome presides in charity. Your Holiness, this is what you are exercising today, this great charity. The same Apostolic Father and Martyr, in his letter to the Romans, said, "I am the wheat of God, ground by the teeth of the beasts, to become the pure bread of Christ." Right here in this cathedral, 10 years ago, during the Divine Liturgy on Sunday, 48 Christians, children and adults, women and men, among them 2 young priests, were massacred by terrorists. There were also more than 100 wounded. These innocents mixed their blood with that of the divine Lamb to witness to their oppressed brothers and sisters murdered or uprooted in Iraq and in the Near East, that Jesus himself, the Savior God, will continue to live in them as he promised. And we, fortified by this faith, with courage, wish to witness the risen Christ. We implore to accelerate the beatification of these martyrs whose cause is in process, so that they can exhort all of us here present to live our call according to their example. Thank you, Your Holiness. We continue to pray for your ministry, and we ask for your blessing. This was His Beatitude Ignatius Yusuf III Yunan, the Patriarch of Antioch and of the Assyrians, and we will now hear from Cardinal Sacco, the Archeparky of Baghdad of the Chaldean Church, Catholic Church.
Santità,
Your Holiness,
con molta gioia,
with great joy,
a nome mio e a nome
in my name
degli eminenti pastori
and on behalf of the eminent pastors of the Catholic churches in Iraq,
rivolgo il benvenuto nella
I
terra
extend
di
our
Abramo,
welcome to you in the land of Abraham, the father of believers, with a popular expression we repeat when welcoming our pastors. And what he just said means, welcome, O Father, to our church. This is a great joy for all Iraqis. Your visit is a sign of your interest in the Eastern churches. Thank you, thank you. We thank you for this courageous visit that deepens our trust in the Lord and encourages us to continue in the life of faith and constancy or perseverance, to consolidate our mutual fraternal relationships between Christians and with our Muslim compatriots whom we love as brothers and sisters. As you called them in your encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti. Christians were the great majority when the Muslims arrived in our country, and they gave much to the Muslims. Rather, our ancestors created a model of coexistence, contributing notably to the culture. Today, we have become a minority, but we are a lively and active minority, and we have contributed to the construction of Iraq and to the development of its culture. In these last years, we have undergone many difficulties, dangers, and persecutions, and the greatest witness is this Cathedral of the Syriac Catholics, in which we are gathered this evening, which was subject to a criminal bombardment on the 31st of October 2010 during Holy Mass. 48 martyrs were killed, among whom were two of our young priests, Taher and Wasim, and many were wounded. In 2014, ISIS forced all of the 120,000 Christians of the plain of Nineveh and Mosul to flee. We thank God for the fact that these areas were liberated in 2017, and almost 50% of the inhabitants have returned. Despite what has happened to us and our pain, we have preserved the faith, our spiritual serenity, and our fraternal solidarity. And all the churches have done a great job of standing by the people who have been harmed, to help them and alleviate their suffering. Your Holiness, your paternal visit gives us the grace to overcome adversity. It reassures us that we are not forgotten, and it generates in us confidence and enthusiasm to continue our journey of faith and evangelical witness, notwithstanding the difficulties we face, and to contribute along with our Muslim compatriots and others to construct our country on solid laws and to establish the values of citizenship and coexistence on the basis of a respectful fraternity in diversity and pluralism, God willing. Thanks to your prayers, your continued interest, and the goodwill of the Iraqis, we will emerge from our crises toward a better future. Thank you. We just heard the words of His Eminence Cardinal Louis Raphael Sacco, Metropolitan Archbishop of Baghdad of the Chaldean Christian Church, Catholic Church. He was created a cardinal by Pope Francis in the consistory of June in 2018. Our Holy Father has now taken his seat, and we prepare ourselves now to hear his words.
Beatitudini, eccellenze, cari sacerdoti, religiosi, care suore, cari fratelli e sorelle.
Your Beatitudes, Your Excellencies, dear priests and religious sisters, dear brothers and sisters, I embrace all of you with the Father's affection. I am grateful to the Lord, who in His providence has made it possible for us to meet today. I thank His Beatitude Patriarch Ignatius Yusuf Yunan and His Beatitude Cardinal Louis Sacco for their words of welcome. We are gathered in this Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation, hallowed by the blood of our brothers and sisters who here paid the ultimate price of their fidelity to the Lord and His Church. May the memory of their sacrifice inspire us to renew our own trust in the power of the cross and its saving message of forgiveness, reconciliation, and rebirth.
Il cristiano infatti è chiamato a testimoniare l'amore di Cristo ovunque in ogni tempo.
For Christians, in fact, are called to bear witness to the love of Christ in every time and place, and this is the gospel that must be proclaimed and embodied in this beloved country as well.
أصحاب السيادة الأساقفة الكهنة والرهبان والراهبات الأعزاء الإخوة والأخوات الأعزاء أعانقكم جميعا بمودة أبوية. أشكر الله الذي سمح لنا بعنايته الإلهية أن نلتقي اليوم، وأشكر غبطة البطيارك مارغناطيوس يوسف الثالث يونان وغبطة البطيارك الكاردينال مارويس رافائيل ساكو على كلماتهم الترحيبية. نجتمع اليوم في كاتدرائية سيدة النجاة هذه ونتبارك فيها بدماء إخوتنا وأخواتنا الذين دفعوا هنا ثمن أمانتهم للرب ولكنيسته ثمنا غاليا. أرجو أن تلهمنا ذكرى تضحيتهم بأن نجدد ثقتنا بقوة الصليب ورسالته الخلاصية للمغفرة والمصالحة والولادة الجديدة. ففي الواقع المسيحي مدعو للشهادة لمحبة المسيح في كل مكان وزمان. هذا هو الإنجيل الذي يجب إعلانه وتجسيده في هذا البلد الحبيب أيضا.
Come vescovi e sacerdoti religiosi e religiose e responsabili laici, tutti voi condividete le gioie, le sofferenze, le speranze e le angosce dei fedeli di Cristo, i bisogni del popolo di Dio e le ardue sfide pastorali che affrontate quotidianamente si sono aggravate in questo tempo di pandemia. Tuttavia, ciò che mai deve essere bloccato o ridotto è il nostro zelo apostolico, che voi attingete da radici antichissime, dalla presenza interrotta della Chiesa in queste terre fin dai primi tempi. Sappiamo quanto sia facile essere contagiati dal virus dello scoraggiamento, che a volte sembra diffondersi intorno a noi. Eppure il Signore ci ha dato un vaccino efficace contro questo brutto virus. È la speranza. La speranza che nasce dalla preghiera perseverante e dalla fedeltà quotidiana al nostro apostolato. Con questo vaccino possiamo andare avanti con energia sempre nuova per condividere la gioia del Vangelo come discepoli missionari e segni viventi della presenza del Regno di Dio, regno di santità, di giustizia e di pace.
As bishops and priests, men and women, religious catechists and lay leaders, all of you share in the joys and sufferings, the hopes and anxieties of Christ's faithful, the needs of God's people, and the daunting pastoral challenges that you daily face, which have been aggravated in this time of the pandemic. What must never be locked down or reduced, however, is our apostolic zeal, drawn in your case from ancient roots, from the unbroken presence of the Church in these lands since earliest times. We know how easy it is to be infected by the virus of discouragement that at times seems to spread all around us. Yet the Lord has given us an effective vaccine against that nasty virus. It is the hope born of persevering prayer and daily fidelity to our apostolates. With this vaccine, we can go forth with renewed strength to share the joy of the gospel as missionary disciples and living signs of the presence of God's kingdom of holiness, justice, and peace.
لكي نشارك فرح الإنجيل كتلاميذ مرسلين وعلامة حية لحضور ملكوت الله، ملكوت قداسة وعدل وسلام.
Quanto ha bisogno il mondo intorno a noi di ascoltare questo messaggio. Non dimentichiamo mai che Cristo è annunciato soprattutto dalla testimonianza di vite trasformate dalla gioia del Vangelo. Come vediamo dall'antica storia della Chiesa in queste terre, una fede viva in Gesù è contagiosa. Può cambiare il mondo. L'esempio dei santi ci mostra che seguire Gesù Cristo non è solamente una cosa vera e giusta, ma anche bella, capace di colmare la vita di un nuovo splendore e di una gioia profonda anche in mezzo alle prove. Le difficoltà fanno parte dell'esperienza quotidiana dei fedeli iracheni. Negli ultimi decenni voi e i vostri concittadini avete dovuto affrontare gli effetti della guerra e delle persecuzioni, la fragilità delle infrastrutture di base e la continua lotta per la sicurezza economica e personale che spesso ha portato a sfollamenti interni e alla migrazione di molti anche tra i cristiani in altre parti del mondo. Vi ringrazio, fratelli vescovi e sacerdoti, di essere rimasti vicini al vostro popolo, vicini al vostro popolo, sostenendolo, sforzandovi di soddisfare i bisogni della gente e aiutando ciascuno a fare la sua parte di servizio del bene comune. L'apostolato educativo e quello caritativo delle vostre chiese particolari rappresentano una preziosa risorsa per la vita sia della comunità ecclesiale sia dell'intera società. Vi incoraggio a perseverare in questo impegno al fine di garantire che la comunità cattolica in Iraq sebbene piccola come un granello di senope, continui a arricchire il cammino del Paese nel suo insieme.
How much the world around us needs to hear that message. Let us never forget that Christ is proclaimed above all by the witness of lives transformed by the joy of the gospel. As we see from the earliest history of the church in these lands, a living faith in Jesus is contagious. It can change the world. The example of the saints shows us that Christian discipleship is not only something right and true, but also something beautiful, capable of filling life with new splendor and profound joy, even in the midst of great difficulties. Hardships are part of the daily experience of the Iraqi faithful. In recent decades, you and your fellow citizens have had to deal with the effects of war and persecution, the fragility of basic infrastructures, and the ongoing struggle for economic and personal security that has frequently led to internal displacements and the migration of many people, including Christians, to other parts of the world. I thank you, my brother bishops and priests, for remaining close to your people, supporting them, striving to meet their needs, and helping them play their part in working for the common good. The educational and charitable apostolates of your local churches represent a rich resource for the life of both the ecclesial community and the larger society. I encourage you to persevere in these efforts in order to ensure that Iraq's Catholic community, though small like a mustard seed, continues to enrich the life of society as a whole.
إني أشجعكم على المثابرة في هذا الاجتهاد من أجل أن تتمكن الجماعة الكاثوليكية في العراق وإن كانت صغيرة مثل حبة الخردل من الاستمرار في إثراء مسيرة البلد بأكمله.
L'amore del Cristo ci chiede di mettere da parte ogni tipo di egocentrismo e di competizione. Ci spinge alla comunione universale e ci chiama a formare una comunità di fratelli e sorelle che si accolgono e si prendono cura gli uni degli altri. Penso all'immagine familiare di un tappeto. Le diverse chiese presenti in Iraq, ognuna con il suo secolare patrimonio storico, liturgico e spirituale, sono come tanti singoli fili colorati che, intrecciati insieme, compongono un unico e bellissimo tappeto che non solo attesta la nostra fraternità, ma rimanda anche alla sua fonte, perché Dio stesso è l'artista che ha ideato questo tappeto, che lo tesse con pazienza e lo rammenda con cura, volendoci sempre tra noi ben intrecciati come suoi figli e figlie. Sia sempre nel nostro cuore l'esortazione di Sant'Ignazio di Antiochia. Nulla esiste tra voi che possa dividervi, ma vi sia un'unica preghiera, un unico spirito, un'unica speranza nell'amore e nella gioia. Com'è importante questa testimonianza di unione fraterna in un mondo spesso frammentato e lacerato dalle divisioni. Ogni sforzo compiuto per costruire ponti tra comunità e istituzioni ecclesiali, parrocchiali e diocesane servirà come gesto profetico della Chiesa in Iraq e come risposta feconda alla preghiera di Gesù affinché tutti siano uno. Pastori e fedeli, sacerdoti, religiosi e catechisti condividono, anche se in modi diversi,
إن محبة المسيح تطلب منا أن نضع جانبا
The love of Christ summons us to set aside every kind of self-centeredness or competition. It impels us to universal communion and challenges us to form a community of brothers and sisters who accept and care for one another. Here I think of the familiar image of a carpet. The different churches present in Iraq, each with its age-old historic, liturgical, and spiritual patrimony, are like so many individual colored threads that, woven together, make up a single beautiful carpet, one that displays not only our fraternity, but points also to its source. For God himself is the artist who imagined this carpet, patiently wove it, and carefully mends it, desiring us ever to remain closely knit as his sons and daughters. May we thus take to heart the admonition of St. Ignatius of Antioch, quote, "Let nothing exist among you that may divide you, but let there be one prayer, one mind, one hope in love and in joy," unquote. How important is this witness of fraternal union in a world all too often fragmented and torn by division. Every effort made to build bridges between ecclesial, parish and diocesan communities and institutions will serve as a prophetic gesture on the part of the Church in Iraq and a fruitful response to Jesus' prayer that all may be one.
سيكون بادرة نبوية في كنيسة العراق واستجابة مثمرة لصلاة يسوع بأن يكونوا جميعهم واحدا.
Pastori e fedeli, sacerdoti, religiosi e catechisti condividono, anche se in modi diversi, la responsabilità di portare avanti la missione della Chiesa. A volte possono sorgere incomprensioni e possiamo sperimentare delle tensioni. Sono i nodi che ostacolano la tessitura della fraternità. Sono nodi che portiamo dentro di noi. Del resto siamo tutti peccatori. Tuttavia questi nodi possono essere sciolti dalla grazia, da un amore più grande, possono essere allentati dal perdono e dal dialogo fraterno, portando pazientemente i pesi gli uni degli altri e rafforzandosi a vicenda nei momenti di prova e di difficoltà. Ora vorrei dire una parola speciale ai miei fratelli vescovi. Mi piace pensare al nostro ministero episcopale in termini di vicinanza. Il nostro bisogno di rimanere con Dio nella preghiera, accanto ai fedeli affidati alle nostre cure e ai nostri sacerdoti. Siate particolarmente vicini ai vostri sacerdoti, che non vi vedano come amministratori o manager, ma come padri, preoccupati perché i figli stiano bene, pronti a offrire loro sostegno e incoraggiamento con cuore aperto. Accompagnateli con la vostra preghiera, col vostro tempo, con la vostra pazienza, apprezzando il loro lavoro e guidando la loro crescita. In questo modo sarete per i vostri sacerdoti segno visibile di Gesù, il buon pastore che conosce le sue pecore e dà la vita per loro.
تقع مسؤولية حمل رسالة الكنيسة على عاتق الجميع.
Pastors and faithful, priests, religious, and catechists share, albeit in distinct ways, in responsibility for advancing the Church's mission. At times, misunderstandings can arise, and we can experience certain tensions. These are the knots that hinder the weaving of fraternity. They are knots we carry within us. After all, we are all sinners. Yet, These knots can be united by grace, by a greater love. They can be loosened by the medicine of forgiveness and by fraternal dialogue, by patiently bearing one another's burdens and strengthening each other in moments of trial and difficulty. Here I would like to say a special word to my brother bishops. I like to think of our episcopal ministry in terms of closeness, our need to remain close to God in prayer, close to the faithful entrusted to our care, and close to our priests. Be particularly close to your priests. Let them not see you as only an administrator or manager, but as true fathers, concerned for their welfare, ready to offer them support and encouragement with an open heart. Accompany them with your prayer, your time, your appreciation for their work, and your efforts to guide their growth. In this way, you will be for your priests a visible sign and model of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who knows his sheep and gives his life for them.
وسوف تكونون لكهنتكم بهذه الطريقة علامة مرئية ليسوع الراعي الصالح الذي يعرف خرافه ويبذل حياته في سبيلها.
Cari sacerdoti religiosi e religiose, catechisti, seminaristi che vi preparate al futuro ministero, tutti voi avete sentito la voce del Signore nei vostri cuori e come il giovane Samuele avete risposto eccomi. Questa risposta che vi invito a rinnovare ogni giorno conduca ciascuno di voi a condividere la buona novella con entusiasmo e con coraggio, vivendo e camminando sempre alla luce della parola di Dio che abbiamo il dono e il compito di annunziare. Sappiamo che il nostro servizio comporta anche una componente amministrativa, ma questo non significa che dobbiamo passare tutto il nostro tempo in riunioni o dietro una scrivania. È importante uscire in mezzo al nostro gregge e offrire la nostra presenza e il nostro accompagnamento ai fedeli nelle città e nei villaggi. Penso a quanti rischiano di restare indietro, ai giovani, agli anziani, ai malati e ai poveri. Quando serviamo il prossimo con dedizione, come voi fate, in spirito di compassione, umiltà, gentilezza, con amore, stiamo realmente servendo Gesù come Lui stesso ci ha detto. E servendo Gesù negli altri scopriamo la vera gioia. Non allontanatevi del santo popolo di Dio, nel quale siete nati. Non dimenticatevi delle nostre mamme e delle nostre nonne che vi hanno allattato nella fede, come direbbe San Paolo. Siate pastori, servitori del popolo e non funzionari di Stato, chierici di Stato, sempre nel popolo di Dio, mai staccati come se foste una classe privilegiata. Non rinnegate questa stirpe nobile che è il santo popolo di Dio.
أعزائي الكهنة والرهبان والراهبات ومعلمي التعليم المسيحي والإكليريكيين.
Dear priests, men and women religious, catechists, seminarians preparing for future ministry, all of you have heard the voice of the Lord in your hearts, and like the young Samuel, you have answered, "Here I am." May that response, which I invite you to renew daily, lead each of you to share the good news with courage, and zeal, living and walking always in the light of the Word of God, that we have the gift and responsibility to proclaim. We know that our service necessarily has an administrative component, but that does not mean we should spend all our time in meetings or behind a desk. It is important to go out among our flock and offer the gift of our presence and accompaniment to the faithful in our cities and villages. I think especially of those who risk being left behind, the young, the elderly, the sick, and the poor. When we serve our neighbors with dedication, as you are doing, in a spirit of compassion, humility, kindness, and love, we are really serving Jesus as he himself told us. And by serving Jesus and others, we discover true joy. Never step back from the holy people of God into which you were born. Remember your mothers and grandmothers who, as St. Paul says, raised you in the faith. Be pastors, servants of the people, not civil servants. Ever a part of the faithful of God, never apart, as though you were a privileged class. Do not renounce that noble lineage, which is the holy people of God.
لا تنفصلوا عنه أبدا كما لو كنتم طبقة مميزة لا تنكروا الأمة النبيلة التي هي شعب الله المقدس.
Vorrei tornare ora ai nostri fratelli e sorelle morti nell'attentato terroristico in questa cattedrale 10 anni fa e la cui causa di beatificazione è in corso. La loro morte ci ricorda con forza che l'incitamento alla guerra, gli atteggiamenti di odio, la violenza e lo spargimento di sangue sono incompatibili con gli insegnamenti religiosi. E voglio ricordare tutte le vittime di violenze e persecuzioni appartenenti a qualsiasi comunità religiosa. Domani a Ur incontrerò il leader delle tradizioni religiose presenti in questo paese per proclamare ancora una volta la nostra convinzione che la religione deve servire la causa della pace e dell'unità tra tutti i figli di Dio. Questa sera voglio ringraziarvi per il vostro impegno di essere operatori di pace all'interno delle vostre comunità e con i credenti di altre tradizioni religiose, spargendo semi di riconciliazione e di convivenza fraterna che possono portare a una rinascita di speranza per tutti. Penso in particolare ai giovani. Ovunque sono portatori di promesse e di speranza, e soprattutto in questo paese. Qui infatti non c'è solo un inestimabile patrimonio archeologico, ma una ricchezza incalcolabile per l'avvenire. Sono i giovani, sono il vostro tesoro e occorre prendersene cura, alimentandone i sogni, accompagnandone il cammino, accrescendone la speranza. Benché giovani, infatti, la loro pazienza è già stata messa duramente alla prova dai conflitti di questi anni. Ma ricordiamoci loro, insieme agli anziani, che sono la punta di diamante del paese, i frutti più saporiti dell'albero. Sta a noi coltivarli nel bene e irrigarli di speranza.
أود أن أعود الآن إلى إخوتنا وأخواتنا الذين لقوا حتفهم.
Let me mention once more our brothers and sisters who died in the terrorist attack in this cathedral some 10 years ago, and whose cause for beatification is underway. Their deaths are a powerful reminder that inciting war, hateful attitudes, violence, or the shedding of blood are incompatible with authentic religious teachings. I also want to remember all the victims of violence and persecution, regardless of the religious groups to which they belong. Tomorrow in Or, I will meet with the leaders of the religious traditions present in this country in order to proclaim once again our conviction that religion must serve the cause of peace and unity among all God's children. This evening, I want to thank you for your efforts to be peacemakers within your communities and with believers of other religious traditions, sowing seeds of reconciliation and fraternal coexistence that can lead to a rebirth of hope for everyone. Here, I think especially of the young. Young people everywhere are a sign of promise and hope, but particularly in this country. Here, you have not only priceless archaeological treasures, but also inestimable treasure for the future, the young. Young people are your treasure. They need you to care for them, to nurture their dreams, to accompany their growth, and to foster their hope. Even though they are young, their patience has already been sorely tried by the conflicts of these years. Yet, let us never forget that together with the elderly, they are the point of the diamond in this country, the richest fruit of the tree. It is up to us to cultivate their growth in goodness and to nurture them with hope.
تقع مسؤولية زراعة الخير فيهم وإرواء رجائهم.
Fratelli e sorelle, attraverso il battesimo e la confermazione, attraverso l'ordinazione o la professione religiosa, siete stati consacrati al Signore e invitati per essere discepoli missionari in questa terra così strettamente legata alla storia della salvezza. Siete parte di questa storia, testimoniando fedelmente le promesse di Dio, che mai vengono meno, e cercando di costruire un nuovo futuro. La vostra testimonianza, maturata nelle avversità e rafforzata dal sangue dei martiri, sia una luce che risplende in Iraq e oltre, per annunciare la grandezza del Signore e far esultare lo spirito di questo popolo in Dio Salvatore. Nuovamente rendo grazie perché abbiamo potuto incontrarci. Nostra Signora della Salvezza e l'Apostolo San Tommaso intercedano per voi e vi proteggano sempre. Benedico di cuore ciascuno di voi e le vostre comunità. E vi chiedo per favore di pregare per me. Grazie.
Brothers and sisters, first through your baptism and confirmation, and later through your ordination or religious profession, you were consecrated to the Lord and sent forth to be missionary disciples in this land, so closely linked to the history of salvation. You are part of that history, faithfully bearing witness to God's never-failing promises as you strive to build a new future. May your witness, matured through adversity and strengthened by the blood of the martyrs, be a shining light in Iraq and beyond, in order to proclaim the greatness of the Lord and to make the spirit of this people rejoice in God our Savior. Once again, I am grateful that we have been able to be together. May Our Lady of Salvation and the Apostle St. Thomas intercede for you and protect you always. I cordially bless you and your communities, and I ask you, please, to pray for me. Thank you.
وأطلب منكم أن تصلوا من أجلي. شكرا.
At this time, there should be an exchange of gifts that takes place here. As we get a good overview of this cathedral, we can remember that this is we are looking on a site where 48 of our fellow believers in Christ of the church here in Iraq gave their lives for the faith. A reliquary, most likely of one or several of them, now being given to our Holy Father by Archepark Ephraim Yusuf Abba Mansour. He is the Archepark of Baghdad of the Syriac Catholic Eparchy. Our Holy Father did kiss the reliquary, venerating the relics. And now our Holy Father presenting the gift he generally gives to the ordinaries of the diocese is that he visits with a chalice. We should be reciting the Our Father now together, after which our Holy Father will extend his apostolic blessing. He's inviting Cardinal Sacco to begin the Our Father in Arabic.
Benedica vos, omnipotens Deus, Pater, et Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus.
Amen. Questa stola è stata fatta da donne di Caracos, fatta a mano questa stola.
He is explaining that the stole was made by hand by someone in Caracos. And it sounds like we no longer have an audio feed. There should be a final hymn, and our Holy Father will be signing the Book of Honor. After which he will then, here we go, we do have the audio feedback. We see him now signing the Book of Honor here, leaving his message here for the Syrian Catholic community of the Cathedral here in Baghdad. The bishops here represent the Assembly of Catholic Bishops of Iraq, representing the Chaldean Church, the Syriac Catholic Church, the Armenian Catholic Church, and the Melkite Catholic Church, as well as the Latin Church. And His Beatitude, Louis Raphael Sacco, the Cardinal here at our Holy Father's, what would be our right, is the president of that assembly. The Latin bishop also belongs to the Conference of Latin Bishops for the Arab region, which comprises bishops from various Middle Eastern countries. Our Holy Father now signing the guest book here. The message that he is leaving is, as a penitent and a pilgrim of faith and of peace in Iraq, I ask God to grant this people, through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, the strength to rebuild the country in fraternity. So we join our Holy Father in that prayer for our brothers and sisters in Iraq, trying to rebuild their country. The Iraqi Christian community, composed of Chaldeans, Assyrians, Armenians, Latins, Melkites, Orthodox, and Protestants, has been marked by persecution, as we have heard, also discrimination. Under Saddam Hussein, Christians lived through a motto that, or lived under a regime that allowed the church to carry out its activities, also through its charitable acts. But already with Saddam Hussein, there were succession of wars which started in the 80s, which began the exodus of Iraqi Christians abroad. The most massive of these exodus occurred after the U.S.-led military intervention in 2003, and then between 2014 and 2017 with the establishment of the self-proclaimed or the so-called Islamic State in the north of the country. On the eve of the Second Gulf War, Christians in Iraq estimated between 1 and 1.4 million, which would have been about 6% of the population. Today, the number of Christians present here in Iraq, barely 300 to 400,000, which is based on estimates of the Pontifical Foundation Aid to the Church in Need. Our Holy Father now posing here for a photograph with the bishops and Cardinal Sacco, who is present here. They're singing in Italian. Holy Father, most welcome. This is the second and final event of Pope Francis's first day on his 3-day visit to Iraq. He will now be taken to the Apostolic Nunciature, where he will dine and spend the night. It's almost 6 p.m. local Iraqi time right now. The Apostolic Nunciature is in the area, also located in the Karada district. It's an upper middle class area, one of the 2 main districts where Christians live here in Baghdad. This now ends the live broadcast from Baghdad in Iraq of the second and final event of the first day of the Pope's Apostolic Journey, where we've been coming to you live from the Syrian Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation, where Pope Francis has just finished meeting with bishops, priests, religious seminarians, and catechists. We invite you to join us tomorrow. Our Holy Father will be taking part in an interreligious
ceremony in Ur, we ask you to visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. You will find full coverage of our Holy Father's 33rd apostolic visit here in Iraq, as well as other Vatican and world news. Once again, I'd like to thank the technicians at every level who've made this broadcast possible, and to all of you for joining us on our Holy Father's apostolic journey. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.